start. Yeah. Is the screen visible? Hello. Is the screen
Yes,
visible?
sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So the first thing we learn two things. We learn loops. We learn conditional statements and something that I may have missed in the past week. Let's start with conditional statements. This will help you learn loops better. So what a conditional statement is, it is a statement which is executed only when a true boolean is returned. For example, let's say I take an integer. All right. So first of all, the syntax is if if starts the conditional statement, then your conditions. Let's say my condition would be a is greater than 0. Right. Then the semicolon, and then the next line there should be a 4 space gap or a tab if you may. And this is called an indentment, and this is very important. If you miss it, there would be an indentment error. Let me show you. If I start writing here, print, let's say positive, right? You will see this will give out an error. Run this here. This is expected at indented block. So let me give it 4 spaces. Now, most of the IDEs are configured in such a way that a tab is equal to 4 spaces, so you can use a tab instead. Right. So we'll use it again. And this time it shows positive. So what this does is Python sees the if and then it searches for the condition. Then it evaluates the condition, and if the condition returns a true statement, then it executes the lines below it. For example, let me show you. If I just simply write print a is greater than 0, you can see this statement is printed as true. So this is true, so this is true, and this is executed. Now, let's say if this is not what we want, so we use a else statement. Follows the same syntax. In this case, else does not have a condition because uh, else is executed when all of the conditions have failed. We can say print negative, right? When I do this, it prints positive, but if I call it, let's say -2, it returns negative. Now there's another thing called an else if statement. All right. Now for an else if statement in other languages we use else space if. Here we use L if if then the condition else if a is equals to 0, then else print negative. So let's try all the conditions. We'll do this. It's positive. Let's do this. And 0, and let's do -2. And this returns negative. Now the important thing to remember here is the order of the conditions you specify. All right. Here the order of the conditions does not matter, but there will be some programs when you will have to take care of the order of the conditions. What it does, it will first look at this condition. If this condition is satisfied, it will not look at any other condition. Right. So you will have to take care of the flow of the program for this. Now, this is basically what conditional statements are, and yeah, that's about or I can think of our conditions. So let's move to loops. So there are two kinds of loops. The first one is, sorry, uh, a for loop and a while loop. Now, a for loop is used much more than a while loop because the for loop will rarely result in a infinite loop, whereas a while loop may result in an infinite loop if you're not careful. So let's start with the syntax. For the for loop, we use the statement for, then uh, let's say a variable in. So this is the basic statement for I in. Then what you want to what you want to iterate over, what you want to let's say move over. So let's say let's create a list. A list, let's call it li, and this is a list of all the car companies. Let's say, not car companies, let's just say numbers for now because I have to think some random car companies. So it starts with for, then a variable, then in statement, and li, or the iterator, what you want to iterate over. So what this statement will do is it will go to li, it would take the first thing out, and not out, it will take the first thing and store it in I, and then execute whatever is below it. And as you can see, this follows the same four space gap as your conditional statements and everything, because the four space gap or an indentment is very important. So let's say just print I, or let's make it elaborate number, just I is equals to comma I. As you can see, it iterates over I is equals to 1, then I is equals to 2, then I is equals to 3. So a for loop is used, yeah. So a for loop is used with a iterator, or something you can iterate over, something you can move with. So I first got the value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now let's say you want to print 100 numbers. For this, you otherwise you'll have to use a list of 100 numbers. But there's another function in Python called the range function, right? What so and the range function, basically the syntax is start, stop, which is not inclusive, then the step. This is the syntax for the range statement. Let's say we start with 0 and end at 6. And when we print it, you can see it stops at 5 because the 6 is not included. If we want to include 6, it will have to be 7. And then we print, and now 6 comes in. But let's use the step function again, and let's say it will take a jump of 2. You can see 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 is not included because 10 is the upper range, which is not inclusive. Now let's move on to the while loop. Now while loop is used only when you do not know how many times the loop will basically run. So the syntax basically is while, then a statement, while let's say a equals to 10, while a is greater than 0, print A, then now the reason why this um, can lead into infinite loop is, let's say I forgot this A equals to A minus 1 statement. So this decrement won't take place, and this statement will be true infinitely. And yeah, there's one thing I should also tell you. A minus equals 1 is basically this, and this is the same statement. This is just a shorter way of writing it, but this and this is the same statement, right? So when we print this, we're supposed to print it, print but A is greater than, yeah, A is greater than 0. As you can see, it printed 10, 9, 8, 7, it's all of that. Now this is a place where you can use a for loop too. But let's say you do not know, let's say while true. All right. Now this statement will always be true. This would lead to infinite loop. Whatever you do inside the loop would not matter. This would always lead to an infinite loop because this statement, the conditional part, is always true. But let's say A is equals to A is equals to 100. All right. Now, while true, let's say if A is equals to 0. So we used a conditional statement inside a loop statement. So if A is equals to 0, we use the break function. Now what this break function does is, what the break function does is, it will move out of this loop. Let's shorten it, otherwise it will be very long. What this does is, it will break out of the loop when this condition is when this condition is satisfied. So now this is an infinite loop, but the loop can be broken using this statement. And let me show you another statement. This is called the continue statement. If A is not equal to 0, it will move to the if statement, the else statement, and then it executes the continue statement. Now what the continue statement does is, now whatever I type below it, let's say A is equals to 0, all right, this would not matter at all, because once it sees the continue statement, it ignores everything in the loop. I could type anything below the loop and it would not matter. It would just go back to the top of the loop. Right. So let's say, yeah, but this would lead into A is equal to A minus 1. Right. Otherwise, this would go into infinite loop and I would have to restart the IDE again. So let's see. Okay, I was supposed to print the value. Yeah, so when it reaches 0, the value of A 0 is printed. But here I said A is equals to 0 when the else in the else condition. But because of the continue statement, it did not go downwards and it moved upward instead to the start of the loop. So this is the while loop. Now let's say you use something like, let's say, yeah, you use a if statement and you have a condition. Let's say A is greater than 0, A is greater than 0, and you do not know what you want to put inside the statement for now. So you can use the statement pass. Okay, what this does is, this is basically a placeholder. What it does is, If you remove this, this will give out an error because there's supposed to be something here. So this basically acts as a placeholder for when you do not know what you want to put in the statement at that moment. So I guess that's basically concludes the blue part. So there's some things you need to know uh, right now for your assignment, which I will be giving you today. So the things you need to learn is the input statement, the split function, and let's say list comprehension for your own knowledge. Let's put it list comprehension for now. Yeah. So let's say you want to make a program. Now every program needs a certain input from the users, right? And what you can do this using the input function. What this input function does is it basically stops the execution and it looks for an input. Now the input ends, let's say, not exact input, say, and this finishes the program. Now let's print, okay, yeah, so yeah. So unlike other languages, let's say this is a long string. So the input statement, what it basically does is it stops the execution. Then it asks you for uh, it asks you to type something. Now whatever you type can be anything, but as soon as it ends with the slash n or enter, and enter is basically inserting a slash n. Okay, so as soon as it finds a slash n, that is the end, right? So the input function looks for a slash n, which is right here, but it is not shown because this is a graphical system and it is used such that the slash n is removed, and then it prints whatever was before the slash n. Right now, one thing you need to remember is the type of whatever is printed is input will be a string. Whatever I type, let's say I type 1, this 2 will be a string type. Like, so whatever you input using the input function is called a string type. So you can convert it into an integer using the, you can convert it into an integer using the int function. Now the int function takes a few parameters. The most important one is the let's say string or whatever you want to convert. Then a few other parameters, like there's this base parameter, I guess. So you will have to look it up in the documentation if you want. Then there's this string converter, and then there's this float converter, and then the pool converter. So whatever the input is, it will always be a string, but you will have to convert it into uh, the desired type, right? Otherwise, it would return an error like, let's say, print a plus 1, right? Now, when I type 1 and press enter, it will give me an error. It says can only concatenate strings to strings. All right, but this is a number, so this will not concatenate. But if I convert it into a string, this will give out 1, this will give out 11. All right, so always be sure that you convert the input into the desired type. Now, input also takes up a parameter, let's say, and this is a string parameter. let's say this, right? And when I run this, it prints this, whatever is inside the parenthesis, and then it stops the execution completely. All right. So this and this ends the execution. All right. So you can use this, or you can just use print this. You can use this either way, but yeah, this is really important because you cannot take input from the user, then your program will not. It's basically useless. Let's say. So let's move on to the split function. On the split function, I shared you a bunch of websites, and there was the split function. Now the split function is one of the most important functions. It is used for it's a normal cleaning or the even other stuff. But yeah, so let's say we have let's input a string, and let's say this so that we know what we're typing. Then print a dot split. Now the split function is can be only used on a string. All right, an integer cannot be split obviously. So yeah, let's say this and let's run it. You see, this is a test of the split. Okay. You can see this entire statement has been converted into a list. Now, how does it decide what uh, at what point should it divide the string? All right. So by default, split has a space parameter. All right. If you do not specify it, split has a space parameter by default. So it splits everything at the space point, like this space and this space. But if I specify a breakpoint or a split point, let's say, let's specify it as a comma, and when I run this again, this is a test. This is not split at all because it's looking for a comma, which we did not find. But this is comma a test, and this splits perfect. So when we go to file handling, you will use the split function to basically make a CSV parser, let's say. Yeah. You will use this to make a CSV parser. So always remember that here you can use a parameter, right? So these are the things that you can easily forget. Now let's move to something that is not so important, but still it's important that you learn complete Python if you are actually learning Python. So before that, let me just pause for a second and ask if anyone has any doubt regarding what I just taught. If you wanna ask something, if you want to type something to try what the output will be, you can ask that too. What is the use of end in print? Can you elaborate the? Acha, हाँ, all right, I get it. What you're asking. So what the print function basically does is, let's say you print this is something, right? And that's it. Then if you print something, print space, this is something else. Now, as you can see, this and this is this is something and this is something else prints on two different lines because print also takes up a parameter which is called end, and the end by default is slash n, right? But if we specify a different end line, let's say a space, and let's remove the space here, you will see this is the first string, then and then comes the end part. This is the end part. This is the end part. So if I, let's say, I don't know if, I think it works, right? Yeah. What the end parameter does is it puts whatever is uh, at the end of the string, and then puts n, sorry, what the end parameter does is it puts whatever is in, sorry, whatever is passed at the end of the string. All right, but by default it is slash. Now slash n is basically an enter. So if I do this, this is the same output. But if I replace it with slash t, right? Now there's a bigger gap. This is slash t space. All right. So Ashutosh sir, I guess this clears your doubt what the end statement does. And anyone else has any doubts? So I see no doubt. So yeah, let's move on. And let's move on to list comprehension. Now, let's say you want to make a list. All right. You can make a list using 1, 2, 3, 4. You can use manual input, or you can use list function and then pass in a range of something, right? Let's say 0, 10. And then when you print a, it prints 0 to 9. Okay, this is one way to make up a list. But let's say you want to make a different kind of a list. Let's say you want to make a list of the square of every number from 0 to 10. All right. So for this, you will have to first create a list, then iterate over every element, and then get it square, and then save it into the list again. But in Python, you use something called a list comprehension. Let's say, yeah. The syntax is basically it's the same as a list. It starts with a variable I for I'll just do this now and then I'll show you for I in range, right? 0 to 10, 0 to 11, and then okay, yeah. This is what list comprehension looks like, right? So what happens here is this, yeah, move how to do it, yeah. This part is executed, right, for I in range 0 to 1. So this part is executed once and I is set as 0. Then this statement is what will create the list. This part, everything before the for part will what will create a list, right? So first it gets I, then it puts I here, uh, then it gets 1, then it puts 1 here, and then it puts 0 and stuff. So let's say I want to say make a list of squares of every item. All right. Let's say I into I. Okay. So what this will do is it will get I from here, and then it will execute this part, and then save the result inside the list. Now I think, yeah, yeah. So if I can find the complete C code, I'll share it with you in the next class of how this works. But for now, I'll just tell you this. It gets the I. I don't want to know what the for statement is. I know what the for statement does. Right? So first you move, please. Yeah. First it gets the I, and then it evaluates whatever this is using the I statement, using the I variable. If I do this, first is 0 times 0 1, so 0 times 0 0, 1 times 1 1, 2 times 2 4, 3 times 3 9, 4 times 4 16. Okay, so this is basically list comprehension. Now, why this can be of use is, let's say I make an input, alright, and let's say enter numbers selection, and then now I will use the split function, a dot split, a dot split, right? So this is now a list which consists of string numbers. String numbers is not an actual term. What I mean by this is numbers in forms of string. Now, if I want to convert all of them, um, now if I use the int statement on li, this will give out an error. So let's say 1 comma space 2 comma space 6. This will give out an error which says integer argument can must be a string or a number. It cannot be used on a list. So to convert every single number, you will have to use a for loop. You will have to otherwise use a for loop where you will go over I in li, and then you will have to go li. What will basically, yeah. Then you'll have to convert it into an integer and then save it into its index. All right. Now, if you mess up the index somehow, this would be a real problem. All right. So what you can do instead of for loop is you can use a list comprehension. Okay. So as I said, this part is evaluated for every for this. Right. This part is evaluated, and for every I it gets, this part is stored into the list. So let's say integer I. Alright, so what it does is it gets I and then it stores I here. So, yeah. And then it converts it into I and stores it into the list. If I do this, you will see no errors. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No errors. And let me just print it for reassurance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It prints all of them. So this is basically what list comprehension is. And yeah, it's 440, and I'll show you something. I'll show you some more things that maybe easily missed. All right. As I told you, for strings, all right, you use a single quote or a double quote. You can use a string using a single quote or a double quote. Everyone knows this. Now, let's say we have to use a quote inside another quote. Let's say I have to use a single quote, and then I have to print something which has to be under quotes again. So you can use double quotes and it would be no problem. But let's say you use a single quote again. Right. This would then generate an error, because what Python thinks is the string starts here and ends here. Right. So this will generate an error. Let me show you. He said, and if I use these, this will give no error. Right. This is no problem. This will work just fine if I just printed string. Right. This will work just fine. But if I say, yeah, As you can see, the colors completely changed, and you can see here this will give an error. This will give 11 errors, but yeah, this will give us an error. So what Python thinks is it starts the string here and ends it here. All right, and this is useless. So there are two ways to go around this. All right, let's say the first is using triple quotes. Now this is a different thing. This is also a string, but it works in sort of a different way. So you can use these here, double quotes, or you can use these here. Right? And it prints as it is. But if I say something like this, right, and if I print this, you'll see this is printed exactly like it is right here. So what the triple quote, so triple quote basically prints everything that is within those triple quotes exactly at it, so exactly as it is. If I give it three lines, it would print it after 3 lines. So this is what triple quotes are. Now these are not used to print. Actually, these are used for documentation, and that's why these are basically called doc strings. Now this is a doc string. It's basically again a string, but it is called a doc string because this is what you will find. Wait a second. This is what you'll find at the top of programs. You say things like created by, let's say, the date and stuff. Right. This is what it is used for. You can use a comment too, but let's say your documentation is 100 lines, so you have to use this at every single line and this at every single line. So this is basically what a doc string is. You can also print it, but yeah, this is what its actual purpose is. Now let's say I do not want to use doc strings and I want to print double quotes inside double quotes, right? So what you do is you use something called an escape character, right? Let's say this is all right, or this is not all right. Okay, this so use something like this. We said this will generate an error. Right, so this will give us an error. I'll show you just now. Yeah, it says invalid syntax because this is a string and this is a string. Now what is this right here? Right. So what you can do is you can use something called an escape character. Right. The escape character is basically this, a forward slash or a backward slash. I don't know what it's called exactly. This is called a escape character. And let's give the escape character here. Now it will not give us an error, and it will print. He said this will generate an error. This is print as it is. Now what the escape character does is it basically whatever is next to the escape character is uh, basically removed from the syntax. All right. So if this is right here, so for Python, this is now part of a string, not part of a syntax, not part of its syntax, right? So what the escape character does is it escapes the flow of the syntax for only the next thing that is in front of it, right? Only this. Now if I print do this here, this will again generate an error, and This will also work for these. Okay. Now, why these are useful is, let's say you will never print a statement which uses double quotes, but uh, let's say you use Python to browse through your files. All right. So let's say there's a path c/users users slash thing. Right now, if I print this, it would give us an error because yeah, this is an escape character to Python. All right, this is an escape character to Python, and when it looks at the escape character, it searches for something that can be moved out of the syntax for now. All right, like /n, like /n, and /n. All right, now this will work perfectly. All right, but this will not. Now, but as you can see, a path has to be specified using this. Now you can use this for a path and this would work perfectly. But I guess uh, Linux differentiates between these. So that would be a problem if you ever use Python for in Linux. So what you do here is you use the escape character and then you use the escape character again. Now this part has moved out of the syntax and is now part of the string. Like this is now part of the string and this is now part of the string. All right, so this will work perfectly right now. Yeah. So these are what are called escape characters, and I guess there are the /n escape character, which is the next line character, the /t character, which is the tab character. Right, and I guess that's all I can think about right now. Um, yeah, and it's 4:46, so I guess this is a good time, good place to end our class because now I'll be talking about your assignment. Yeah. What you'll basically do in your assignment is you will input a string from the user, right? And then you will count the occurrence of each alphabet in the string. Let's say the string is S. So what you should return is something like A is equals to 0, B is equals to 0, dot till something P is equals to 2, P is equals ABC, C, D, E. All right. Equals to 0, equals to 0, and equals to 1. All right. So you will first take an input from the user, and then you will use, let's say, you will use a template of this sort and print how many times a specific letter has occurred. All right. Now, for this, I'll give you some hints. So, if you want, you can write them down. The easiest way to do this would be using dictionaries. Right. Now, even in dictionaries, the function you should be using is set default. The you will be using dictionaries and you will be using set default for this assignment, right? And you will count the number of times every single string, okay, every single alphabet occurs in a string. And let's say the string is like T, 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 and T. So I want you to consider them all as lowercase t, and you can convert any string into a lowercase string using a method called lower. Lower, yeah. Now, if I print this, everything is in lowercase. All right. So this will be an assignment. I will put it up on this Google Classroom in an hour or so. So I guess everyone understands what the assignment will be. If anyone has any doubt or anything they want to know more about the assignment, I can drop hints if you want. And if you have doubts, you can contact me or you can even ask here. Okay, so I think I should also understood the assignment. Okay, so I think with whatever I've taught you, this will be pretty easy to do, and I'll slowly increase the difficulty such that you will have to look up um, things on the internet. Like um, I'll give you assignments where you will have to use functions you've never used. You'll have to try them, experiment with them, and then use them in your program. Right? I guess that's it for the class. Santosh ma'am, please take the attendance.
Taken, sir.
Please take a vocal attendance. Right.
Okay, sir. So, first one is Akshara Maithili.
Everyone, open your mic. Your name is called and say, "Yes, ma'am." Please listen to anything that is comfortable. Yeah.
Okay. Ashutosh Soni.
Present, ma'am.
Then Divya Lochna.
Present, ma'am.
Gopika. Miss Gopika.
If your mic is not working, you can type in the chat box. That is no issue.
Yeah.
Please.
Then Miss Kalagni. Miss Kalagni, are you here? Okay. Then Mr. Karthik.
Present, ma'am.
Miss Mungra. Miss Nilima. Then
Present, ma'am.
Mr. Nitin Jain.
Present, ma'am.
Then Miss Pavitra.
Present, ma'am.
Then next Raja Rajeshwari. Okay, then Miss Reshma. Then Miss Nikita. Miss Shailaja. Then Shubh Gahoi.
Present, ma'am.
Yeah. Next Saujanya. Then Shravanich.
Present, ma'am.
Okay, thank you everyone.
So, guys, before you leave, if you have any suggestion about anything regarding the class, you can tell me right now.
Yeah, Miss Shweta T Nisi Thetlapu.
Present, ma'am.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Present, ma'am.
Um, Santosh ma'am, Miss Shri Varsha is also present. I think we did not call out her name or something.
So actually, I think, yeah, I've forgotten about it.
No problem. So, as I was asking, if anyone has any suggestion or you know,
So just wait for 5 minutes. I have to take the screenshot.
no problem.
Done, sir.
So, as I was saying, if anyone has any suggestion, they can tell me or something regarding the class. You can tell me now, or you can text me privately. And I guess that's the end of the session. Thank you, everyone. You can now leave the meet, everyone. Turn off the recording, man. Because now that students are leaving, you can turn off the recording.